Hello, everyone. My name is John McKay, and I'm the Member of Parliament for Scarborough-Guildwood, and I'm here with my buddy, Jean Augustine. We served together in the Parliament of Canada for quite a number of years. I think, Jean, actually, you predate me
Yes.
because you became MP in 1993, but we overlapped for quite a number of years, and
Mhm.
I was always privileged to sit with Jean. I wanted to first of all talk with you, Jean, about um, where you come from. I know for sure that you were not born in Scarborough. And in Scarborough, there's only two kinds of people in this world: people who are born in Scarborough and people who wish they were born in Scarborough. Now, I believe you were born in Grenada. Is that correct?
I was born in Happy Hill, St. George's, Grenada. My father died when I was 9 months old. And
Really?
so that created in the family a void that was filled by my grandmother.
Hmm.
And so I grew up in a family setting with lots of matriarchs around. Of course, there were men around, but I remember the matriarchs
Yeah.
because they were the shakers and the mover, the carers and nurturers of the families and the children. And they were the ones who made the major decisions around, things like education of the kids, uh, getting ready to participate in the sacraments. We grew up Catholic and, all of the things. It was mainly the women in the family I remember, very strong. And at the
And
same time,
your grandmother gave you a kind of a love of learning, did she not?
my grandmother used to say this because she herself didn't have any education like we talk about, like high school and post-secondary education. But she knew the benefit of education. She
Mm.
knew it was important to be educated. And she used to say something that I remember, but at the same time, at the time that she was saying this, I had no idea what it meant. She used to say, girl, education is going to raise the family nose. And raise the family nose,
What's that
education.
mean? Yeah, what
What
does that mean?
when you're a child, you have no concept of what that meant. But
Mm.
later on, I gathered and I garnered what that was saying to us. And I was saying to someone recently, um, she nurtured me with the idea that as a girl, there was nothing I couldn't do and nothing was impossible and out of my reach if I worked hard and if I put my mind to it. And the reason why she had me um, really affirmed in my self-esteem and thinking about where I'm going to go and what I'm going to do and what I'm going to make of my life was the fact that boys in those days, remember we talking now about the 50s and the 40s. I was born in 1937. And the, the families around us who had sons, and even our own relatives who had sons, envelopes were put to enable the sons to go away to school because in Grenada there was no post-secondary school at the time. And the only thing in the Caribbean really was the beginning of the um, the College of the West Indies, which later on became the University of the West Indies. So the young men who families were sending them away to University of Edinburgh, all of the schools in the United States and in England, and also in Canada. But the girls, envelopes were not prepared for the girls.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the girls were supposed to leave school and
But
yeah,
you were the smart kid in the class, weren't you?
I was always number one in the
I
class.
believe that. I believe that. You don't have to know Jean Augustine for very long to know she's pretty smart cookie. Uh,
I was always, and in those days they ranked us first, second, third, fourth in the class, and the fact when I take my report card home, my grandmother would go around with the report card to the families that had boys preparing them for going on. And she said, "Did your boy get marked like that?"
So did you go collect the envelopes that were for them, or just had to say, well, I've got the better report card, you got more money?
Oh, well, you know.
So, so you became a teacher in Grenada.
Yes, because the things that were open to me as a young woman coming out of high school, I had about 4 or 5 avenues open to me. I could be a teacher, I could be a nurse, I could be I could work in a department store or maybe the public service, or and those were, you know, those were the options.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew very early that I wanted to be a teacher. I knew very early that um, that my calling was really in the area of education. And
Yeah.
so I was doing that, teaching there, but at the same time writing away, sending my certificates away and to universities here in Canada and the United States, looking for an opportunity um, to go away like my boy cousins.
So
So
when do you think you became an activist?
I
Yeah.
was very conscious about social justice and social justice issues. And so when you're told you're not a good fit for something, when you followed in the department store because someone think you there to shoplift simply on the basis of your skin color, when there were so many things that were happening in the society, you had to, you know, you had to do something about it. And what is a something? You become an activist, an advocate. You
Mm-hmm.
find other people who are advocating. You find things that needed to be fixed. You march with others. And in those days, the 60s, we were marching. Every weekend there was a march, a protest, a demonstration to make certain things happen, to push policymakers, to push institutions, organizations, government, and people who were responsible for legislation. There was always something, but there was just so much that
Mm-hmm.
needed to fix if you wanted to see a diverse Canada.
How do you come from being an activist, participating member of society, raising your voice, doing it very successfully, to the point where you become a member of parliament? Like
Well,
you're arguably the most influential Black legislator in all of Canadian history. So how do you get there?
well, I got there because I served my time. I served my time as an activist. I didn't get there alone. I
No,
worked with
nobody does. Yeah.
exactly. I
Yep.
worked with others to push different things. I used a specific skill I had, you know, to join with others to move things forward. And we saw things taking place step by step by step. And then I was noticed by people who came and asked me to sit on this board, to be on the board of the Hospital for Sick Children, to be on the board of the Donwood Institute, to be on the board of Harborfront, to be on different places. And when I got there, sometimes I was the only woman, and sometimes I was the only Black woman there. But I made my contribution because I've always done my homework so that I could participate, and I can participate in such a way that I was recognized as having some skills, and I added to whatever board, the board of York University. And it was doing all of this that I was asked to write the section. And remember, I was an educator, and I had my supervisory officer's papers and my master's in education, et cetera, et cetera. I was asked, together with Tony Johnson, who was a professor from Nova Scotia, and a couple other people, they cloistered us in a place called Nottawasaga, north of Toronto. And they said, you have the weekend, 4 days, to write the multiculturalism and education policy. That was 1971. They were putting together the multiculturalism policy. And so I had.
Who are you writing for, though? Who are you writing for?
Oh, writing for the legislators, writing for Pierre Elliott Trudeau. This was the government of Canada putting together legislation, putting together its policy on multiculturalism. And so I was out there doing stuff. It was not until I was appointed by Pierre Elliott Trudeau to the Advisory Council on the Status of Women, because they realized the work I had done in Toronto when we started the issue of violence against women, and we started METRAC, and we started to look at the issue of women and women's whatever.
But fast forward to the politics, because I find this is an extraordinary life's journey, and you've done some amazing things. So, how do you get to become the member of Parliament for Etobicoke Lakeshore in 1993?
Well, in 1993, I was approached. The very first person who approached me was John Tory. And John Tory at the time, yes, he was going to, well, I knew John Tory well because we had been on the board of Harbourfront together. And he was asked to run the campaign of Kim Campbell, remember, after Brian Mulroney.
Oh, right.
And so he was taking on the task. So he called me down to his office for a coffee. And he said, I'm going to be running Kim Campbell's run for the leadership. And I would like to bring you with me as, you know, as a member. And I said, John, you know, I was not conservative. And we had just come through a really bad time when we were looking at the Mulroney's policies and whatnot. And I just knew that I was not conservative in my thinking. Then the next person who asked me was Bob Ray. Evelyn Gigantes, who was the minister at the time, who was the minister for housing, came to me with, you know, Bob Ray would like you to run for the, was it Alexa McDonough? Who was it now? Who was the leader of the party
NDP
at the
leader,
time? Yes.
And what was the one before her? I can't remember.
And I said, no. And at the same time, as I thought about things, I kept thinking the way the media treated politicians at the time, I just felt that wasn't me. They were corrupt, they were thieves, they were dishonest. And that definition of a politician, when one said, you know, would you join me in politics? I just felt that was not the definition of me. But anyway, the Liberals came, and then they came again, and then they came again, and they came again.
But most of us don't have that string of invitations behind us, Jean. There's only one. If there was a Green Party around, they probably would have asked you too. So, my goodness, Jean. So I hadn't realized all this. I didn't know you were so popular with everybody right across the political spectrum. So no wonder it makes absolute sense that you were instantly a big player, like ba-boom.
Remember when I was appointed or elected to sit in the speaker's chair.
Yep.
Remember, the support came from all the parties in the House. It was the parties in the House who made that happen.
You were deputy speaker.
You know,
I'm surprised the NDP would have voted for you, though, since you turned them down. The Conservatives, the Conservatives are down to 2 seats.
They were down to 2 after the election.
Yeah.
But anyway, I went out there in '93, and it was a riding where I was the principal of a school in that riding.
Oh, were you?
And so I was known by a number of the families. But the thing is, I ran against Patrick Boyer.
Serious guy.
Patrick was a leadership candidate. I liked Patrick, you know. And when the school that I was in, I used to have Patrick come in to talk on special days, and you know, I remember. And but I said to him, you know, it's too bad I like you, but I'm going to whoop you.
Oops. That was an oops moment.
Muhammad Ali. But anyway, I did win, and I won by large numbers.
Yeah. And kept on winning by large numbers, as I recollect. You had a real stranglehold on that riding for a while. So you become a big deal. You become a cabinet minister. You're chair of a committee. You're parliamentary secretary. You know, you're kind of doing the dream thing, and yet you're, in spite of all those positions, you are the mover of the Black History Month and the recognition of the
Yeah.
famous five and things of that
Yes.
nature.
Yes.
So tell us how the Black History Month came about, because it's become a really, really big deal.
From
And we're
coast to
talking to the
coast.
person who made it a big deal. So,
Well, again, as I said earlier, when you're in the system, you don't see anything that speak to, the African Canadian history and so I was making stuff up. But
making stuff up.
yes, oh yes, I would go to the library and find out,
Yeah.
age appropriate things to teach the kids.
Yeah.
Because I knew that we had to talk about the African presence in this Canadian mosaic. At the same time, as you may know, Black History Month started in the United States in 1926 by someone called Carter G. Woodson. And Carter Woodson started to work with librarians and others to put books out and to encourage the reading of material about African Americans. And he chose the month of February, where there were two birth dates, Lincoln Alexander, who's accredited for freeing the slaves, and Frederick Douglass, whose birthday was also in that week, and a speaker and someone whom Black communities look up to as a leader. So Black history had been happening year after year, the month of February in the United States. We had several Black men here in Toronto who could not get jobs other than work on the railway. And so they were on the trains, they were coming back, they were bringing posters, they were bringing brochures, and they were sharing that in their clubs and with the Negro Women's Association that was in Toronto at the time. And they started to pick up and to celebrate in February. But it was American history.
Yeah.
It was, it was that history. They would have their church service to celebrate Black history. They would, the Ontario Black History Society picked up on that, asked the city to do a proclamation, and the city proclaimed Black History Month in Toronto. And when they asked the federal government, I think it was Sheila Feinstein, or just lost his name now, was the Minister for Multiculturalism at the time. And they said, no, we don't do, the federal government does not do proclamation. What would they proclaim? And the letter and the tone was just such that I felt the activism in me came out. and I said, what can we do? What can I do if we want to have Black History Month in Canada? And I'm not too sure if you remember Jerry, he passed away now. He was the one who gave advice in the House and helped members along.
Jerry Yanover.
Jerry Yano. Jerry says you have two choices.
Yeah.
You can do a private member's bill, or you can do a motion. A private member's bill meant you have to do a lot of the work. You have to get it all done, all legal, all whatever, and then you put it in the hat. And then you draw it. Do they still do that?
Well, we're actually assigned numbers at the beginning of every parliament, and if you're lucky, you get a good number. If you're not so lucky, you get a lousy number.
Well, the thing is that I didn't want to take my chance on that, because I had been buying lottery tickets over the years and I never won. So I thought my chance of doing all that work, putting it in the hat for a draw, I wouldn't, I would not get this done. And further, to go the private members route was also to deal with the House that we had, the Preston Manning and the Reformers, the new Bloc Québécois it was just not a house where you would put something like that for debate.
Right.
So the second route, he said, was do a private members motion. So of course I started with my staff and we started drafting this private members motion. And every time I went back, they would say, hey, do you want a debate or you want a motion?
You want a unanimous consent is what you want.
So you want unanimous consent. So then if you want unanimous consent, then all you can do is just the facts And they kept telling, just the facts, Jean, just the
Yeah.
facts, Madam
Yeah.
Augustine.
Well done.
Yeah, yeah,
Well done.
yeah.
That's
But and it
it's
was
an amazing
before,
accomplishment.
yeah,
It's an amazing
but
accomplishment.
John, it was before we have social media.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
I was walking around with a number of trees under my arm
Yeah.
because I had to speak to all 305 members.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had to do the motion 300 how many times
Yeah.
so that I could leave the motion with them as I asked for their consent.
Yeah. Well, the social media, frankly, Gene, is a mixed blessing, to put it that way. Yeah. But we're running out of time, and your life has got crazy number of accomplishments to it. I think you've actually lived 3 lifetimes, Gene, not one. The other one I wanted to talk to you about was the famous 5,
Yes.
because you're if they're going to write something on your tombstone, and I don't think there'll be a big tombstone will be big enough, but they're going to write something about the Black History Month, but they're also going to write something about your role in the recognition of the famous 5. So tell us that story.
Okay, I'll do that quickly. As you know, the famous 5 were the women who wanted to be appointed as senators, could not be, did not see their role. They were chattels of their husbands or their fathers. They had no specific privileges to be allowed for appointments to the Senate. And they appealed to the first court. They appealed to the provincial court. They lost. Our constitution at the time was in Britain.
Yeah.
And so the final appeal for anything that we were doing in Canada had to be in the Privy Council in Britain.
All right.
And so these women decided that they were going to go to Britain. They had tea parties to raise funds. And this is why, if you notice, the monument to statues have them having tea around the table.
Yeah,
and that's how they raise funds,
Yeah.
Sunday afternoon teas. And they collected what they can. And a lawyer from Toronto who was very much engaged, I'm sure from what I've read, he was not really into feminism, but at the same time, he was into the discussion that lawyers had, whether the Constitution was built in stone and therefore cannot be amended, or whether the Constitution was almost like a tree with branches.
Right.
So he decided he was going to help these women, and pro bono, he would go with them to Britain to plead their case. When they got to Britain, the Lord Chancellor, whatever he's called, who was the chairman of the Privy Council, had lived all of his life, most of his life, with his mother. And his mother had just passed away, they say, and here he is, mourning his mother's passing. And these Canadians come to make their case that women are not persons.
Yeah. So
the case, I understand, got done in about 10 minutes. He said to them, women are indeed persons. They're persons in law. And so they won, and they came back to Canada with the hope that they would be appointed to the Senate. The Prime Minister at the time had said to them, if the court said, I will.
Mm-hmm.
And he made the appointment. Unfortunately, the women who fought did not get appointed to the Senate, because the next appointment that came up was in the province of Ontario. And so it was a woman from Ontario. To get the statute, what happened at the time on the books, the statute said that only prime ministers who were nation builders statues could be around Parliament Hill, or prime ministers, who were nation builders statue could be on the Hill, or statues of dead monarchs.
Really?
So you see, there would not have been a woman for a while, because we didn't have any prime minister who was a woman and a nation builder, and dead monarchs. So Sheila Copps, who was a minister for heritage, had to rescind that piece of that statute, which made room for me to put the motion on behalf of women's I was chair of Women's Caucus at the time, and we
Mhm.
discussed this, and we supported the women from Alberta who would pay for, raise the funds to do
Yeah, yeah,
to do the statues.
yeah.
And so it took me a full day to get that motion passed.
Wow.
And so we
That,
got, yeah.
that's a great story. We're gonna have to end it there. It reminds me of the Bismarck story. There's two things in life you shouldn't see. One is the making of sausages, and the second is making of legislation. And so those are great and remarkable stories, and we are going to have to leave it here.
Yes.
I've always known you as Jean Augustine. Now I'm going to have to call you Saint Jean Augustine, because you've had some really excellent work that you've done on behalf of the people of Canada, and you have an amazing story, Jean, an amazing story, and I'm just
Mhm.
so pleased that you would consent to do this interview, particularly in Black History Month, and particularly leading up to all the things that are going on. But let me just, before I just tie it, this is a unique year for if you will, the Black movement, for want of a better frame. What are your final thoughts on why there's a sense of urgency?
Well, I think it has to be now. Now that, the old saying, if you know better, you have to do better. We've had a reflective time. The pandemic has shown us the difference between the haves and the have-nots. It has shown us the gaps in the society. It has shown us where and how we need to look at people who serve us in the society as essential workers. It dealt with the issue of our mental health and some of the issues of social justice. It showed us before our very eyes the cruel and the savage killing of George Floyd. Black Lives Matter has helped to emphasize and to raise the level of discussion around the issue. The issue of systemic discrimination, anti-racism, have created conversations for corporate bodies, institutions, and other places to begin to look at their systems and see what they could do better as we work towards diversity and inclusion. And coupled with all of this, the 25th anniversary of Black History Month, we're also in the midst of the decade for people of African descent. What the United Nations have done is show us, or tell all the countries of the world, because there was agreement around that no matter where in the world people of African descent are, they suffer the same things.
Hmm.
Incarceration levels, low employment, less income, and on and on and on, no matter where in the world people of African descent. So the United Nations has given us 10 years. Canada has 10 years to clean up its act, as it were,
Mm-hmm.
and to ensure that when we come on the other side of this COVID discussions, that all the conversations we've been having in this urgency of now would create situations that life would be better as we go forward.
That is so well said. And I think that's probably, there's nothing I can add to it. I just want to thank you, Jean, for agreeing to do this, and just appreciate you for your life. I consider it an honor and a privilege to have known you and to have been one of your colleagues. So thank you, Jean.
Okay, thank you.